Welcome, everybody. We're glad to be here. Renee, thanks for coming and spending the day with us. Renee and I have been friends and colleagues for a long time. She treated my dog for osteosarcoma like 23 years ago when we had to sneak him into a human radiation center. So thanks for coming, and I love your book. If anybody has not had the opportunity to read it yet, I would certainly encourage you to. It's a great read. So wanted to start off our question and interview today, obviously with the question that most veterinarians get is, how did you decide, or why did you decide to become a veterinarian? And most specifically, what made you pick oncology as a specialty?
Okay. All right. Can you guys hear us? No. All right. Let's see. Can you hear me if I do this? Awesome. Great. So the question was, why did I decide to become a veterinarian? And specifically, why did I decide to become a veterinary oncologist? I think like so many of us, I have wanted to be a veterinarian since very little. I was 7 years old. And despite having people try to talk me out of it, my own father included, you realizing how difficult it was, how it, there's so many more medical schools, you'll make more money as a human physician. I never, ever wavered. I've always wanted to be a veterinarian. And my father was actually a human medical oncologist. And though he never brought his work home with him, I think I was always enthralled. One summer after sophomore year of veterinary school, I did an externship at the Animal Medical Center in New York City. That was when during vet school, they had the bulletin board, which is how we found out about all of our information, right? No internet. And on a sheet of paper with a tack was an application process for AMC, and I applied for oncology. I was fortunate enough to get it, probably because nobody else was interested in cancer at the time. And that really changed my trajectory. Before we go on, I would like to just extend such a huge thank you to North Star Veterinary Specialists and to Dr. Stobie and Maria for doing this. And also for all of you guys, you get it, right? We're doing this day in and day out, and it's really, really hard. And I hope what comes out of this discussion is that we remember why we all got in this field. We always try to do the best medical care, learn the best, treatment for heart disease or kidney disease, but to get to talk about things that are so near and dear to our heart and the human-animal bond, I hope it really helps.
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank you for including me in this event. I very much appreciate it. I come from the perspective of a client and a pet parent, and most importantly, from adoption and rescue. I've known Dr. Stobie for many years, and I just met Renee today. I read her book twice. I absolutely loved it, and I highly recommend it if you haven't had an opportunity, because it's really wonderful. So since I have 0 degrees in veterinary medicine, I'm interested in veterinary school and what lesson you learned in veterinary school. Maybe your most important lesson.
So the most important lesson I learned was actually an anti-lesson. I was a senior veterinary student following around a very seasoned clinician. And I remember he was giving sad news to a family. And it wasn't cancer, it was something else. But the family just started to have tears come down. And I remember the veterinarian's starched white lab coat sleeves were just straight down by his sides. And I got a little misty. The family took their pet and they left. And he took me to the back. And he said, "Come here, Renee, let me tell you something." He's like, after a few years, after a while, this won't bother you. You'll harden up a little bit. Don't worry. And I thought, oh my goodness, if I ever harden up and this stops bothering me, then I need to stop doing it.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a really, really interesting perspective. And as a client, I think it would be very important to have veterinarians care that much. Thank you.
Okay, so next question. I know in your book, you mentioned that a lot of your friends encouraged you to write the book. What ultimately was the thing that inspired you to take pen to paper and write the story?
So I have always wanted to write a book or be a book editor, but as a veterinarian or in the veterinary field, it's all encompassing, right? I couldn't imagine after working a 10 or 12 hour day and being a mom and a wife and volunteering, coming home and writing. Unfortunately, in 2018, I developed, as I call it, the C word, or cancer. And at the time, I didn't do any social media. But it was so hard to keep having the same conversation over and over again with all of my friends and family. So I decided to email 75 of my closest friends, about how I was doing every few weeks. And people, I have to tell you that the email replies that I would get were a lifeline. So if you ever have someone who's doing this and they're reaching out, just those words of encouragement make such a difference. I clung to them. But in addition, so many people also said, have you ever thought about writing a book? You really should write a book. I blew them all off. I finished treatment. I convalesced. I might meet them at the local, Whole Foods. They would say, have you started your book? I blew them off. And then one long weekend, my husband and I took a little trip to Rhode Island, and we stayed at a resort. And this is like a luxury now. You open up the hotel door, and there's a newspaper. I read two sections, the horoscopes and the comics. And in my horoscope, under Scorpio, I kid you not, it said, you should begin writing your book today. And then 2 days later, I began writing.
It's awesome. Great story.
Wow, that's a great story. What do you hope people take from this book? And do you think the takeaways are different for a veterinarian versus a pet parent?
So for those of you who don't know, the book is a true story, and it is all about life lessons from dogs, right? We teach them to sit and stay, but perhaps they really teach us how to heal. I think that, if I backtrack a little, each chapter is about a different patient and either what that family learned from that dog or what I learned, and then woven through is my backstory. So there's many lessons, but I think the overriding lesson is that dogs are not just incredible friends and companions, but they are fantastic guides for when we struggle. And we all struggle at times. And I hope that the book gives this incredible front row seat to the human-animal bond and the enormous power that it has in our lives.
Yeah, a lot of things that you said in the book really resonated with me as far as how, animals handle their diagnosis and treatment compared to us. Like I had a client just last week whose dog had to have an amputation, and they were so worried that the dog was going to be upset that it was losing its leg. But, I had tried to explain to them that dogs don't care. As long as they feel good, they make the best of it. And that's certainly something that we can learn from them. And they also don't worry. So I think that plays a lot into how we do after a diagnosis like that. So the book's not just about dogs that are diagnosed with cancer and treatment. A lot of it's about your own personal diagnosis and treatment. What were some of the things that surprised you about human medicine and the way they treat their clients and patients compared to us?
So I feel very fortunate with the medical care that I received. I am so incredibly grateful. But veterinarians, I do believe that human medicine can take a nod from some of the things that we do. We tend to honor that entire family dynamic. When, at least for me, I go to my physician, they give me a treatment plan, and I follow it blindly. As veterinarians, we take into account so many more things. Cost of care, ability to come and go, risks that the owners or the pet parents, risks for side effects. So many things come into play. And I really do believe that we get to know the family and understand them. I think that was really the biggest lesson.
I'm really glad to hear you say that, because I feel like as veterinarians and specialists, we give a treatment plan, And it's the gold standard that we want. But I always tell clients, because a lot of things, again, that you said in your book resonated with me, that a lot of it is what they can handle financially, what they can handle time-wise, what they can handle emotionally. Is the pet's disposition appropriate for this treatment? And that there really is no right or wrong answer. The right answer is what's best for their family. And I feel many times as veterinarians, we feel like unless we can do the gold standard, we're not doing the best thing. But that's really the art of practice, is finding a customized plan for that pet and their family so that they can get the treatment that they can afford and handle as a family. So based on your extensive knowledge of cancer biology and treatment, do you think that information was helpful or hurtful when you got diagnosed and treated yourself? Because I know myself, when I had to have surgery, I was like, did I have a pulse ox on me? Am I going to be intubated? Did they give me this? And so I almost sometimes, if you know too much, it can be worse.
Right. I do believe that it depends on your vantage point. I think I was super annoying to my physician group because I would ask them the nature of leukopenia of one of my drugs. And the medical oncologist looked at me like I had 5 heads, and she said, oh, you'll have to go to floor 4 and ask the pharmacist, right? But as veterinarians or as oncologists, we know those answers. For me, I believe that knowledge is power. No different than when we try to educate our clients as much as possible. I was glad to have all that knowledge, but I think sometimes it makes it harder because we know what can go wrong. We know the risks, and that sort of weighs us down a little bit.
Thank you. I guess in addition to what you're just talking about right now, I'd be curious as to how you believe animals handle their medical conditions versus humans, and what maybe we can learn from our animal companions on how to deal with our own issues.
So you all know that animals are such better patients than we are. In addition to just their biological behavior and healing faster, I think the one lesson from them, just as a whole, is that they live in the moment, right? A week before I received chemotherapy, I worried, I fretted. Are they going to be able to hit my vein? Will I get sick? How sick is sick? And then even once I was done with my chemo and leaving, I thought, it took the nurse 3 tries to hit my vein. What's going to happen the next time? Dogs don't have that, right? Many of them eagerly pull you in the waiting room, just sniffing, eager to be there, looking for a treat and a biscuit. The joke is maybe if my gynecologist had given me a box of Godiva or a little Godiva after my treatment, I'd been a lot happier. But even once they're done, they hop up off the table and they're done. They don't lament. They don't let that negative energy push them down. They use their positive energy to heal.
Yep. Yeah, a lot of mind over matter, probably something we could all learn from them. So compassion fatigue is a huge issue in our profession. It's certainly one of the buzzwords of the time, especially after all the hard work that everybody's been doing during COVID. Have you personally ever suffered from compassion fatigue, and especially with what you do with oncology, dealing with those tough emotions? And what advice would you give to our colleagues and especially the younger veterinarians that are coming in?
That's a great question. I think on some level we all do, right? Or we just get so burned out. And in oncology, probably should admit this to everyone, although I don't think everyone can hear us, so we're all good, is that I would cry, probably every week or 2 weeks. And my team just got that. But I think what helps is building an incredible support team in the back, right? Because it's not just you. It's your technician staff, it's your CSRs, it's the clinic aides, it's all of us. And we talk about those sad emotions. We talk about losing that special patient that maybe we've treated for 2 years or gotten to know that family. And that really helps. Instead of us all just going to our own corners and shoving down our emotions. I think too, trying to keep the environment a happy one. For us, music really helps. Or if it's a hard day, I'll order lunch for everyone to just feed us, not just physically, but also emotionally. I can tell you though, when I go home at night, I can't watch anything serious on TV. I need a mindless sitcom because I just can't do it otherwise.
Yeah. Very intense.
So I was very interested to read in your bio that you started a support group for people and parents who lost a pet. And while today grief counseling is common, it was certainly not common 30 years ago when you started that. Can you talk a little bit about what made you start that and what you learned from that and maybe how it has evolved over the last 30 years?
So I wonder if Neil Bloom is here, because he was a year.
He's right there.
Is he? I missed him.
He's right there. Front
Oh my
row.
gosh. All right. So when I was a senior veterinary student, I realized that so many families, it didn't matter if it was cat, dog, horse, they were so sad and were just left so empty with the loss of their animal. And I remember going to one of the clinicians, and Michigan State didn't have anything at all. They kind of weren't that interested. But I said, you know what? If I do all the legwork, if I start something, can we meet here? And she said yes. She, sort of was my mentor in a sense. But I was able to get enough charitable donations to hire a grief counselor. And I made up little cards, and they were available, to whomever and to the local veterinary community. And they met, it was either the first and third or second and fourth Thursday of every month. And it was really popular. In fact, I have since learned that it is still going on today. I remember asking him, because he's the class of 92, I knew that when I graduated in 91, that there was a good chance that it would fold. So I tried to get an incredible amount of donations to still pay the bereavement specialist so that it could go on.
That's a great legacy. And I know following your lead, we started that in our practice, and that's really important to people. And it's one of the most well-attended things at our hospital. So I find it ironic that as an oncologist, you love boxers. That's your breed. You talk a lot about Newton in your book, and I think we all have a dog that's our one-in-a-lifetime dog that is our special soulmate. Was he that for you?
Was Newton that for me?
Yeah, was Newton your one-in-a-lifetime dog?
He was not, actually.
Okay.
No, he was my special needs dog. I have had 5 boxers, and he truly was special needs. He did a lot of really wacky stuff, and people would say, you need to scan his brain. And I would always think, I'm too cheap to scan his brain. What's it gonna matter, right? And I finally did. And we realized that the caudal half of his brain did not fit in his skull. And because of it, it was turned 90 degrees, which intermittently put pressure on his frontal lobe, making him wacky. And then he had a 3 by 3 centimeter area smack in the middle of his brain that was just air. There was no brain tissue. So think donut, right, in his head. But it was the best thing I've ever done, because instead of us getting angry at him for his behavior, all 3 of us in our family understood it, right? And so he became a very special member.
Okay, interesting.
So based on the success of this book, have you considered writing another book, and what would the topic be? I think it should be how pet parents deal with grief, but I'm sure you have some other ideas.
That's a good idea. I would like to write a second book. HarperCollins has mentioned it to me, but yeah, I've thought of some titles, but that's about it.
So to be determined.
Yes, yeah.
So I noticed when I read your book, which I think I might have said before, you smile, you cry, all of the emotions, all of which are good. You highlight some really special pets in that book. My guess is after this many years, you probably have many other pets that have really touched you. Would you like to elaborate on any of them?
Sure. So I have reams of paper and pets with the different lessons. So I could have chosen so many others. But the ones I chose really just fit for what I was going through at the time, and their lessons were very obvious. I think, though, one of the dogs that didn't make it in the story belonged to a gentleman, Mr. Lee, and he would bring his little Shih Tzu in. She had lymphoma. She did great. She lived for 1.5 years disease-free, but I could never connect with him. He would only answer in one word or very short answers. He would always look down at his shoes, never make eye contact. And I thought, oh, he's just shy. But even 1.5 years later, we didn't have that rapport. But everyone's different. Unfortunately, the little Shih Tzu lost its battle. And a month after, I received a large manila envelope at the hospital with a big handwritten note and photographs. It turns out, and I might tear up a little bit, but it turns out that his 23-year-old daughter had been very sick, and they bought the dog for her as a therapy dog and to cheer her up. She passed away 2 months before the Shih Tzu had cancer. So he couldn't give up on his dog, right? That was his link to his daughter. What I didn't know and what I wished he had told me is that he couldn't afford the chemotherapy at all. And so after his regular day job, he took a second job at the local grocery store. He worked the midnight shift, and he was the gentleman who cut cold cuts at night for the shoppers in the morning. And I only wish that he had said something, right? I mean, the whole joke sometimes is we have bleeding hearts, but we do, and we would do anything to try to help.
That's a great story.
Wow. That should be in your second book. That's a beautiful story. It really is.
Yeah. So after reading your book, I just wanted to say that one, I loved it. It was amazing. And when I finished reading it, I think the thing that I felt the most was like hope. It gave me such hope for the future, for our profession. I know that we've been all working super hard since the pandemic and feel really beat up by clients and staff and all the other dynamics that go on. But I felt like it really emphasized the human-animal bond, why we do what we do. I felt like ready to get up and go to work the next day after reading it. And I just wanted to thank you for that because I think it's really important. It made me realize, too, how important animals are to their people and how important our job is to society. So I want to encourage everybody to hang in there because the world needs us. So thank you for coming here today and doing the interview with us. And at this time, we want to open it up to questions from the audience. And afterwards, Dr. DrAlsarraf will be up here if anybody wants to have their book signed or purchase a book. Thank you, Renee. It was great.
Thank
Really
you so
appreciate
much.
it.
Thank you, Renee.
Everyone.